Picture this, a sweet cinnamon sugar swirl in a soft pillow-like dough coated in a warm and delicate glaze. Now picture it 100% vegan. This recipe has been sitting in my recipe card tin for about 3 years now, while my neighbors are out here looking for dairy-free alternatives that don't taste like sweet cardboard. This weekend, I'm entering a baking competition, raising funds for a good cause. If you can whisk and wait 15 minutes for your yeast to bloom, you could also make these foolproof cinnamon rolls. So let's get into it. Signing up for this baking competition fundraiser really had me nervous, y'all. It's been very many years since I've baked for a cause, and I want everything to be perfect despite making this recipe more times than I can count with positive customer feedback. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I love baking. I loved it so much that after high school, I wanted to make a career out of it and go to school for baking and pastry. The program ended up being full, so I ended up with my culinary arts degree instead, which turned out to be perfect because I wouldn't be here without it. Now I bake in the form of a hobby, and I absolutely love it. I know you've heard the phrase before that baking is a science, and it's true. One wrong misstep and your fluffy cinnamon rolls can swiftly turn into dry, dense hockey pucks. And I think that's why I love it, because it takes patience and great care. Because this is a vegan cinnamon roll, I made some calculated swaps so that you honestly couldn't tell the difference from the vegan to a traditional cinnamon roll. Instead of eggs, I used a flaxseed egg, which still provides structure and moisture. Instead of cow's milk, I used plant milk, and instead of real butter, I used plant-based butter. I'm quadrupling this recipe, but I am very much a creature of habit. I can't just mix everything together in one go. I like to set out my cute little bowls to ensure that I have everything and place them in the mixer as needed. And yes, I repeated this process start to finish 4 times. If you tend to be impatient, this recipe is not for you because there is a whole lot of waiting done to get the perfect dough. Making the flax egg is a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning 1 tablespoon of flaxseed meal to 3 tablespoons of water to give you the equivalent of 1 egg. And with that, I waited 15 minutes for that to gelatinize. My recipe also calls for buttermilk, which I make myself, mixing a 1/4 teaspoon of apple cider vinegar to a 1/3 cup of almond milk, and wait for that to curdle. Sifting flour helps remove lumps and incorporate air, making it lighter, more evenly distributed, and easier to mix into batters. The yeast is really where majority of the science comes into play. First, testing the water to make sure that it's between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. If the temperature is too high or too low, it kills the yeast, and then you could kiss soft, fluffy rolls goodbye. You also have to feed it some sugar to help it bloom. It's almost like having a little pet. I let my yeast rest for about 15 minutes, so I just measure out everything else I need for this recipe while I actively wait. Now, if you're keeping count, we currently have our flaxseed egg gelling, our buttermilk curdling, and our yeast blooming. Now do you get why I said earlier, if you lack patience, this recipe ain't for you? Once the wait is over, I pull out my standing mixer, isn't she beautiful? And I add in the bloomed yeast, sugar, melted plant butter, flaxseed egg, buttermilk, regular milk and oil, and some vanilla extract. After a little mix, I gradually add in my flour, salt, and baking powder, mixing with my dough hook until combined and sticky. This dough is going into a lightly oiled bowl and covered with a damp towel. And if you haven't guessed the theme of this recipe, we're waiting for the dough to rise and double in size for about an hour. The key to helping it rise is to place it somewhere warm. So that could be on top of your refrigerator, near a game console, or inside your oven with the light on. Meanwhile, read a book, go for a walk, wash some dishes, just anything because you do have an hour to kill. Let the fun part of this recipe begin. Starting with 1/2 cup of softened plant-based butter, mix in a cup of brown sugar and a tablespoon of cinnamon to get the most delicious filling ever. The idea for this is to make sure that the filling is soft and velvety smooth. Punch the risen dough down to release the air bubbles from the dough and roll it onto a lightly floured surface. The dough is so soft and workable enough where you can just press it into a rectangle to keep the cinnamon rolls as even as possible. Then I go in with a rolling pin to spread it out further. Now is the time to test out your painting skills. Smearing the filling right to the edges, making sure that the entire surface area is covered. Then roll from long side down with a firm but gentle tension and pinch the seams shut. Some people use unflavored dental floss or a knife to slice their cinnamon rolls, but I just use my bench scraper because it's what I have and it hasn't failed me yet. I transfer these beauties to my baking sheet, and typically this would be the time when we would let the rolls rise again for 30 minutes. But I'm not baking these off until tomorrow, so I wrap them in a food safety bag and refrigerate overnight. Okay, it is the following day now. I had the cinnamon rolls pre-rolled out in the refrigerator overnight. Now this isn't a step that is necessary. I just wanted them to be as fresh as possible for the fundraiser, which is today. So if you wanted to cook this the day of, all you have to do is let the pre-rolled cinnamon rolls rise for like another hour or so until it doubles in size, and then just bake it off. But since I had it in the fridge overnight, I'm going to take them out, let them rest for about like an hour or so, just so that they could go down to room temperature before I bake them in the oven at 350 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes until they are golden. What is a cinnamon roll without a delicious glaze to put on top of it? I like to keep my glaze quick, simple, and to the point by mixing confectioner's sugar, almond milk, and almond extract together. You can substitute this with vanilla extract, but it just doesn't hit the same way. I personally like to do a double glaze for my cinnamon rolls, so I let them cool for about 10 minutes before adding the first layer of glaze, and then let it cool for an additional 15 minutes before the second glaze. The cinnamon rolls are all packed up and ready to go, so now I need to go change into my chef coat and head on over to the fundraising event. If I don't get too distracted, I'll be sure to take a little bit of photos and footage just so you guys can see how the event went, and I will post it towards the end of this video. I hope you liked coming along with me making my famous vegan cinnamon rolls. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And remember, healthy does not mean boring.